To you, our viewers, before the story begins, subscribe and ring the bell for this and future captivating stories. Stay till the end. The lesson is worth it.
I walked into the courthouse with a single envelope and a pulse like a drum. The lobby smelled like old paper and lemon cleaner. My hands felt steady, but my heart did not. I handed the clerk a thick packet. Bank statements, authenticated voicemails, a chain of custody affidavit, and a USB with a recording I had never planned to play in public. My voice was calm like glass. "Please deliver this to the judge," I said. "I'm asking for an asset freeze." The clerk nodded and took the packet carefully. Across the hall I saw Andrew's lead counsel. He looked up, his face going pale. For a second the room seemed very small. I could hear the hum of the heating and nothing else. I thought of the 10 years I had kept our household books while Andrew smiled for cameras. I thought of late nights cross-checking numbers until the patterns made sense. The assistant closed the folder and walked away. In the doorway, Andrew's lawyer answered his phone and mouthed something. I watched him put the phone to his ear and whisper, "We have a problem." My mouth went dry. I left the courthouse as if I had just crossed a line I could not uncross. 6 months before that morning, I found a wire confirmation on the kitchen counter. It sat among cereal boxes and a school flyer. The slip said $200,000 and the memo line read, "Consulting LLC." I picked it up like a breadcrumb. I asked Andrew about it that night at dinner. He smiled with the practiced ease of someone who wanted no trouble. "Business expense," he said. "One of the firm's consulting payments." His voice sounded casual. I watched him delete an email from his phone when he thought I was not looking. I had already taken a picture of the thread on my own phone earlier. A small habit I kept. I cross-checked the deposit with our checking ledger and found dozens of similar entries. Each one matched times when he bought something big or we planned special family trips. He always told me not to worry. I had learned how to hide worry behind patience. The math began to show a pattern. Little by little the small payments tied to a hidden company grew into something deliberate. When I pulled up the names, the same surname kept coming back. It was not a mistake. It was a plan. I closed my eyes and wrote the dates down. The list was long. The pattern was clearer when I made a spreadsheet. I sat at our old kitchen table and typed each line by hand. Small transfers became a web. There were payments timed right before vacations and other payments timed after new cars appeared in driveways. The memo field showed names that did not fit our family circle. I printed hard copies and laid them out like a puzzle. Each entry lined up until there was no doubt. The math was neat. It was not messy, it was deliberate. I found a small company signature card hidden among Andrew's files. He had a folder where the card lived like a secret. Tucked inside was a receipt for a luxury watch. The receipt used the same shell company name. My hand shook as I slid the receipt out. I thought of the times he told me he could not afford certain things and then came home with gifts I loved. Every gift came with a small lie. I felt a cold anger I had kept folded down for years. The house seemed smaller. Somewhere in the wall the clock ticked on. I planned my next move carefully. I would not act on impulse. I was tired of being underestimated. I chose fact over fury when I confronted him. We sat at the same restaurant where we had first celebrated a promotion. The tablecloth was linen, the candles low. I placed the printed spreadsheet on the table and slid it toward him. I spoke slowly. I listed dates, amounts, and memo lines. For a moment he gave me the doting husband smile as if it was a game. Then he reached for his phone to distract me with a joke. When he did, his screen flashed a message I did not expect. "Wire set for Friday AM says go." His fingers moved too fast and he pocketed the phone. He kissed me like nothing was wrong and told me I was paranoid. The waiter asked if we wanted coffee and the moment held like fragile glass. I swallowed the urge to shout and instead watched him. I did not need him to admit it then. I only needed the record. He thought he had hidden everything carefully. He did not know I had screenshotted that thread weeks earlier. I left dinner with facts in my hand and a strange calm under my skin. There would be no dramatic scenes. I would work quietly and precisely like I always had. One night he said he would be home late. He slipped out of the house with a generic goodbye that did not match the break in his voice. I followed without telling anyone. My car kept a safe distance 2 blocks behind. He walked down a quiet street and opened the door to a townhouse I had never seen him visit. A woman left the building minutes later and waved at him like it was ordinary. It felt very far from ordinary. I wrote down the address and later checked public records. The townhouse was paid under a P.O. Box company name, not a person. I felt the ground tilt under me. That night I hired a private investigator. I told him simply to follow Andrew and see where the money went. He sent me photos a few days later of Andrew and a woman on a yacht, laughing in a way that belonged to another life. He also sent invoices for weekend trips they had taken. The private eye found a key card entry log. Andrew's key card had been recorded at that townhouse almost every week. I read the reports alone in the dark, clutching a mug of tea gone cold. I had been keeping the family books for 10 years. I had learned how to see patterns. I needed proof now more than ever. The private investigator's package included more than photos. He sent bank metadata that showed an offshore transfer scheduled for 2 weeks out. The metadata had timestamps Andrew could not erase. It came from a server in a different state. The offshore account belonged to a childhood friend of Andrew's, which explained why the name had seemed familiar but not linked to the woman. I felt my stomach knot. If the money left the country, it would be gone. I could taste panic at the thought. The PI noted a wire scheduled in 48 hours. He said, "You should act fast." I called my attorney immediately. I also dug deeper into Andrew's failing LLC. The business had mounting tax liabilities. The more I dug, the clearer the motive became. He was moving money quietly to cover debts and keep the firm's public face shiny for as long as possible. I felt anger and a cold satisfaction that the numbers told the truth I had suspected. The next wire could mean the difference between frozen accounts and vanishing funds. I slept badly that night and woke up with a plan. The motive fell into place when I opened the LLC's tax notices. The company owed more than they had told anyone. If creditors came, they would take everything. Andrew had begun siphoning funds to hide them and to keep appearances for investors. My hands trembled as I read a draft prenup amendment that would leave me with nothing if it stood. It would shift all our marital assets toward him and label company withdrawals as legitimate business expenses. I felt betrayed in a way that hurt deeper than anger. In a drawer I found a recorded message he had left on my phone months earlier during a night of heavy drinking. In it he bragged about redirecting funds to save things and named the shell entity. He sounded both cocky and tired. I decided to authenticate the voicemail. I did not want to rely on memory alone. When the experts confirmed the voice and the timestamp matched an offshore transfer 2 days later, I felt a cold clarity. This was not small theft. It was a plan to leave me with nothing. I called my lawyer and said, "We need an emergency motion." The lawyer's office smelled like coffee and paper. He was a quiet man who listened more than he spoke. "Top-tier defense will try to paint you unstable," he warned. "They will claim you are making things up. They will say you are a spendthrift who wants a payout." He told me Andrew had already hired forensic accountants to spin the books as losses. But to freeze assets we needed proof of imminent dissipation. He said the bank metadata could be that proof. The wire had a timestamp and an origin that tied to the shell company. He told me about chain of custody, about affidavits, about how to submit digital evidence properly. I felt relief that I had chosen the right kind of quiet, meticulous and legal. He warned me about PR smears too. "If anyone wants to take your kids, they will try to make you look unsafe," he said. I thought of Andrew's charm in public and his habit of smiling through trouble. He left the office with a plan to file an emergency motion. I walked to my car thinking of the children asleep at home, and the thin line between keeping them and losing everything to a lie. The day I needed the bank slip, a clerk at the local bank slid across a small printed wire confirmation. His hand shook when he placed it in my palm. "He thought he deleted it," he said softly. He had looked over his shoulder like someone in fear. The confirmation showed a transfer to Consulting LLC with a clear timestamp. The clerk told me someone had reversed the wire at the last minute. That reversal did not erase the intent. It stayed on the record. The beneficiary name matched everything I had tied together. It also showed a P.O. box in another state used for the shell company. I felt the metal in my chest turn warm and heavy. The clerk warned me quietly that higher-ups were nervous. I thanked him and left, clutching the paper like a talisman. With the slip and the voicemail authenticated, my attorney said we had enough to ask the judge for a freeze. Still, a part of me trembled at how easily money could slip through fingers. The wire was only a piece of the puzzle, but it was the piece that could stop the rest. I felt the minutes tighten like a watch spring. I saw Maria at a charity event. She stood under fairy lights looking out of place in a black dress that was either careful or accidental. I cornered her gently and asked simple questions. She claimed she thought Andrew was divorced. Her voice broke then hardened. When I asked about the shell company, she looked away and swallowed. In her phone I found a saved voicemail from Andrew admitting they needed to move money fast. She gave me a printed transcript that matched the voice I had already authenticated. Maria told me, between breaths, that Andrew had spoken of a prenup change that would take away my rights to the home. I felt the room tilt. She cried for a moment and then said, "I never wanted to be part of his plans." Her fingers shook on the paper she gave me. She said she had been told to be careful and keep quiet. She warned me that she had been paid through the same shell company. My world narrowed to a single point. The woman looked at me and said, "You should hurry. There's another wire scheduled in 48 hours. I left the event with a new urgency and a phone full of proof. Midnight found me at the bank's safe deposit center. The night was cold, and the room smelled faintly of metal. I had taken out the original prenup we signed. Spread across the table was the amendment draft I had found earlier. It looked like my signature along the margins, but some clauses were brand new and favored him. The handwriting was mine in places and clearly pasted in other sections. Forensic examiners confirmed that parts had been added recently, and that the ink did not match the older sections. I breathed steadily and asked if they could match the paper. They said yes. I did not sleep that night. I remembered a drunken voicemail months ago where Andrew named the shell entity by mistake. I had it authenticated and now added it to my folder. The evidence was stacking up. I felt the strange calm that comes after a storm begins to gather. I sent a copy of the amended document to my lawyer with a note. This was forged. He tapped his pen on his desk and said quietly, "We will file for a freeze on the accounts and challenge the amendment." I felt the weight of 10 years of work and love shift into a shield I could present in court. The drunken voicemail made me angry in a slow, surgical way. He spoke to a colleague with a kind of careless bravado. "We'll reroute funds to save things," he said, laughing. He named the shell company and the lawyer who would fix the paperwork. The experts confirmed the date and voice. The recording matched a large offshore transfer 2 days later. I took the clip to my attorney and watched his face. He held it up like proof that kept time. He said, "This shows intent." I felt something like relief mixed with shame. It is a strange moment to learn the person you trusted plots in the dark. My lawyer filed an emergency motion citing the voicemail and the bank metadata. Andrew's team fired back, accusing me of fabrication. They painted a picture in their first response. Me unstable, making wild claims. I expected that. We prepared our chain of custody documents and affidavits from the bank clerk and PI. The judge agreed to an emergency hearing at dawn. I did not sleep that night. I only sat at the kitchen table with the file open and the sound of traffic beyond the window. The filing landed like a small bomb. Andrew's team responded with fury, calling me vindictive and orchestrated. I had expected the smear, so I prepared with a monitor for social noise and press replies. Within hours, a friend texted that a source had leaked a story painting me as erratic and dangerous to our children. I felt cold and very exposed. My lawyer said, "Expect this. They will try to make you look unfit." I felt anger rise up as well as a careful pride. I had set traps for every lie. An anonymous DM reached me then. It read, "There's another account. He's routed more than you think." My hands went numb. I called the PI and asked him to dig deeper. He found a pattern that included a trusted nonprofit. My stomach dropped. If he had used a charity to launder money, it would complicate things, because he had always been the public face of generosity. I started to realize how far the web reached. The smear was loud, but the truth had teeth. The PI sent a new file. The nonprofit had been acting as a pass-through. Donations meant for programming had been rerouted as consulting payments to personal accounts. One memo read for Oliver. And I knew Oliver was the name Andrew used for a new car. I felt sick. A board member from the nonprofit contacted me under a veil of fear. He wanted to meet off the record. At that meeting, he confessed that the board had noticed phantom expenses and was uncomfortable. He handed over canceled checks and banker memos. One banker's note showed another wire scheduled in 36 hours. The man's hands trembled as he said, "I do not want to ruin a man, but this cannot continue." He feared for his job and his reputation. He warned me that if this went public, Andrew would come after me hard. I left with a heavy packet and a promise to protect his identity until the right moment. I knew then that this battle would not only be legal but also moral and messy. Under a false name, I attended the nonprofits board meeting the next week. They passed a resolution to audit quietly and not to draw attention. After the meeting, I sat with a board member in a back room while he recounted phantom expenses. He handed me canceled checks and an internal banker's memo showing another wire scheduled in 36 hours to Consulting LLC. He said he did not want to ruin a man's life but felt trapped. The board member's voice was low and urgent. He offered to give me names of people who had been paid, but warned me not to make a public statement yet. I felt the tension of being both angry and cautious. I needed to stop the wire without causing unnecessary harm to people who had been coerced or bribed. I called my lawyer and told him about the new memo. He prepared to file for more extensive freezes and to set the next morning's hearing as evidence for imminent dissipation. I sat at my kitchen table and felt the future waiting like a report on my lap. We were closing in, but the stakes kept climbing. That night, Andrew arrived home furious. He slammed the kitchen door and leaned over the table like a storm. I had recorded the whole exchange on my phone. When he shouted, "You'll ruin everything," I remained calm. I pressed record carefully while staying on his level. He told me I would regret this and threatened custody. His anger sounded hollow and wild. After he left, I sent the audio to my attorney and to the court as a part of the emergency filing. I also emailed copies to a trusted friend who agreed to watch the kids if things escalated. The lawyer called back with a plan. We would present the kitchen recording and the bank metadata at the hearing. He warned me once more about the smear campaign and urged that I stay composed in public. I felt the strange sensation of being both vulnerable and armored. The next morning we had our hearing. I slept for a few anxious hours and woke to the sound of a city that seemed to hold its breath with me. The judge listened to excerpts of the voicemail and the kitchen recording in a small courtroom. Andrew's attorneys objected loudly, but the judge allowed the evidence when the chain of custody documents were clear. The room felt like glass. After hearing testimony from the bank clerk and a PI, the judge froze all accounts pending a full audit. Andrew looked stunned. He stormed out and a photographer snapped a picture of him outside, lighting a cigarette with shaking hands. The image hit the morning feeds and went viral before I had finished my coffee. I felt a strange mix of pity and relief. My children were with a trusted friend and safe. Reporters called my number, but my lawyer told me not to answer. Within hours, Andrew's clients started calling his office. He called me in the evening, voice rough. He said very little except to demand I drop the motion. I did not. The judge's freeze had stopped the immediate wire, but the next phase would be the real fight, the audit and cross-examination. I knew the days ahead would not be easy. By noon, the ripple hit his firm. Clients asked for meetings. Andrew, who had once hosted glossy charity galas, now ducked into private rooms for damage control. He arranged for a high-profile character witness, his law partner. That move surprised me. But when I pulled the old ledgers I had copied, I found payments to that partner listed in the same ledger with shell transfers. I felt sick. The partner's testimony would be hollow if the money trail showed otherwise. I sent my attorney a note with highlighted lines and watched the partner's public schedule cancel. Subpoenas were quietly issued to the partner's office. A junior staffer at that office texted me, trembling, saying she could share memos that proved retainer payments had come from Consulting LLC. I did not open the text in public. Instead, I asked my lawyer to contact the junior staffer and arrange for safe, legal transfer of documents. It was messy and felt small and enormous at the same time. The smell of consequence filled the air. The partner attempted to prepare his testimony, but then emails surfaced revealing he had taken retainers from Consulting LLC the very month he claimed to have nothing to do with Andrew's business. He canceled his appearance. The junior staffer offered to send a packet of internal invoices. The documents showed that the partner had advised Andrew on labeling personal expenses as business consulting fees. This was not just a private cheat, it had legal help. My lawyer prepared a motion to admit the partner's emails as evidence. The judge considered the motion and agreed to review them under seal. The pressure mounted on Andrew. He called and asked me privately to talk. I refused. I would not be part of his script. The staffer who sent the packet insisted she would testify if granted protection. My lawyer passed that request to the U.S. Attorney's office. My confidence grew with the papers in my hand. I felt the relief of truth finding light. The whistleblower packet arrived with stamped memos and internal invoices that matched the dates on my spreadsheet. There were notes where Andrew told his bookkeeper to make it look like a contractor. The bookkeeper had marked up the ledger admitting she had been instructed to keep quiet and had been paid to do so. She wanted immunity and offered to testify. My attorney set up a proffer meeting with federal prosecutors. The weight of that fact made me dizzy. If the U.S. attorney took interest, the case would move from family court to a criminal probe for tax fraud and money laundering. I thought of the neat web of transfers I had uncovered. That web now had threads to real people who had admitted their part. I felt the strange sense of justice that is quiet and steady. I also felt fear. If the prosecutors got involved, everything would change. The bookkeeper's testimony could be the last piece of proof we needed for a full audit. I breathed and waited for the call from the U.S. attorney. The federal interest changed the whole tone of the case. Prosecutors asked for documents and explained how a criminal referral would work. Andrew responded by offering a hush settlement with a gag clause, and a lump sum barely covering my legal fees. The offer tried to bar me from cooperating with criminal probes. I felt the ugliness of the moment. He wanted silence more than reform. I refused. I signed a form to ask the judge to unseal portions of the asset trail, and to allow cooperation with federal investigators. My lawyer warned me this would increase the public heat. Still, I believed truth mattered. The judge allowed the prosecutors to review the records. Andrew's team began frantic calls to his partners and to anyone who might help. He tried to buy silence and begged for a deal that would close the case quietly. I would not let him. The bookkeeper agreed to testify under protection, and the partners' emails were now official evidence. The day felt heavy and electric. I slept for 2 hours and woke up ready for the hearing. The formal hearing felt like being inside a machine that would either save my family or break it. My lawyer walked through chain of custody packets, the offshore trail, the voicemail confession, and the forged amendment in methodical steps. Andrew's defense tried to invoke privilege and accused me of fabrication. Then the bookkeeper appeared on a video and testified to tampered entries. She described invoice numbers that did not match real services. The partner's emails were read in court where he could not hide. The judge listened with a steady face. After hours of testimony, he ordered an independent forensic audit and warned that criminal referrals might follow. I watched Andrew's counsel's face for the first time look truly frightened. That was a strange thing to see. The judge also scheduled further hearings and set strict rules for evidence. I felt a kind of tired victory. The legal system moved slowly, but it was moving. The crowd outside the courthouse buzzed with whispers. I thought of the kids and how I would hold them safe no matter what happened next. The audit's findings were decisive. Investigators found evidence of laundering and forged documents. Partners withdrew and investments were pulled. Andrew's firm suspended him. With accounts frozen and prosecutors involved, the pressure on him was unavoidable. He contacted me offering to settle. I negotiated from a place of strength. I demanded custody protections, a trust for our children funded immediately, and full cooperation with prosecutors. I also asked for a public correction once charges were filed. He signed under duress with his last lawyers beside him. The settlement was staggered and protected our children's future. Photographers were waiting on the courthouse steps and the reporters shouted questions as we walked out. I kept my face calm and my voice steady. I had wanted justice, not spectacle, but sometimes they arrived hand in hand. I felt the odd quiet power of being heard. The nonprofit restructured and the partner faced professional discipline. I felt both relief and grief for the life that had been broken. In the months after the settlement, indictments were filed. Andrew was charged with tax fraud and money laundering. The nonprofit replaced its board and refunded misused donations. The partner faced suspension and sanctions. The bookkeeper received immunity to testify and began to rebuild her life. I moved into a paid house set in a trust and began planning a small consultancy to teach other spouses how to spot financial red flags. The legal battles left scars that would not disappear. But my children were safe and our future secured. The town talked and the press gossiped, then moved on. I felt the quiet work of rebuilding begin in small minutes. School concerts, baking cookies, teaching my son to tie a tie, and reading stories every night. I kept a file for the nonprofit donors so they could reclaim what had been theirs. I made sure the trust was tight and that the money was truly for the children. My life was not the same, but it was honest. Months later, the news cycle had moved past Andrew's fall. Indictments were public and the court moved forward. I lived a life rebuilt on careful choices and hard truth. I launched my small consultancy and taught spouses how to read ledgers and spot doubts. The work felt useful and quiet. One afternoon, I got a text from an unrecognized number. It was from Andrew. It read, "You were always too smart." I smiled, thumb hovering. I deleted the message and shut the phone. I did not need his apology. I had my children, a house in trust, and clear rules that protected our future. I had the satisfaction of knowing my work and my patience had not been wasted. The city moved on and I moved with it. Some mornings I still checked the file folders and breathed, remembering how close we had come to losing everything. Then I closed the folders and made pancakes. The power of truth had been quiet and complete. I had dropped the bombshell 24 hours before the hearing, but I kept the real victory in small, steady days. The house is quieter now, but some nights I still wake and run my fingers along the file folders. Old evidence that became lifelines. I tell this story not for revenge but as a warning and a promise. The smallest record can be the loudest truth. If my quiet work helped protect my children, maybe it can help someone else spot the signs before a life unravels. If this story moved you, please help it reach the people who need it most. Like the video if you felt the tension and the relief. Subscribe and ring the bell to follow future episodes where I break down the spreadsheets, the red flags, and the practical steps I use to protect my family. Tools you can use whether you're worried about finances, trust, or integrity. Share this with a friend, a spouse, or anyone who might benefit from learning how to read the numbers behind the smiles. I want to hear from you. Have you ever noticed a pattern that didn't make sense? What would you do in my shoes? Leave a comment below with your story or question. Your voice could help someone else find their line of defense. If you want deeper resources, tell me in the comments and I'll make a follow-up episode covering step-by-step tips and real checklists. Thank you for listening, for caring, and for being part of a community that values truth over silence. Like, subscribe, share, and comment. Let's make sure the next person who needs help finds it sooner.